Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Robin Easter about their debut novel, Upstaged. Welcome, Robin.
Hi, nice to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me. I love this book, and it's so inclusive. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and what it's about? Give us a little setup.
So Upstaged is about Ashton Price. They are in the summer between middle school and high school, and it is their last summer at theater camp. They are going to be stage manager of the show this year. Their best friend is the lead in the show, and they want to do the perfect musical and also tell her that they have a big fat crush on her. So, just a little summer romp about how things don't always go to plan, and that can be okay sometimes.
Absolutely. So I know from reading a little bit of your bio that you participate in theater. Is that right? And
Yeah.
What's your favorite role, I would say, in theater? Not just an acting role, but what's your favorite position to play in the theater world?
So much like Ash, I am a more behind the scenes person. I'm big time stage fright, so not acting, but I really enjoy, and I grew up doing a lot of like sets and props, theater tech in general, and I've been sewing since I was 10, so I love costumes.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Did you have a theater in the school where you went to high school?
My sophomore year, we finally got a theater program, and my family was really big in participating in that, my sophomore, junior, senior year. So yes.
I love that. I grew up in a very small town, and the high school I went to did not have a theater department. I acted some with church, and then I have as an adult. The first time I was in theater, I was 6 years old. So for me, theater has always been something that I've enjoyed, and slightly different from you. I'm a ham for the spotlight, so I love being on stage. So
Theater needs actors. It can't happen
absolutely.
without them.
Absolutely. And just as authors need readers, theaters also need audience members as well, because you want to perform to someone.
Yeah.
So did you find, as an author, did you find it similar to theater?
In a way, it kind of feels like the past 2-3 years have been me building up to a show, and it is finally no longer Tech Week. My book has hit shelves, and the play has begun. It's very scary, but it's really awesome. Much like theater, there's that adrenaline of like, we're here, there's an audience.
I love that, because I think that is, I would imagine as an author, that would be exactly like theater, in the fact that there's so much build up to it. There's making the story, writing the story. You both write and illustrate. Have you worked on any projects that you've been only one or the other, or have you always been fortunate enough to do both together?
I have always considered myself a storyteller to the core, but I started my career working on the My Little Pony comics at IDW, and I just did art for a while. And then I have done a little bit of just writing and a little bit of both for them. So I've kind of had a very interesting experience of doing a little bit of everything.
That's cool. I love that. And did you, I know this probably sounds like a question you will internally roll your eyes at, but have you always drawn?
Yeah.
I did not get that kind of artistic bug, for sure. So bless you.
Yeah.
So I would say, if we were talking about you being a musician, writing, say, a song, you can write the lyrics first or the music first. I would assume as an illustrator, the story always comes first, but was there one scene that you knew for certain you had to put in as an illustrated scene?
I mean, I knew the show itself had to appear at least a little bit. Other than the fact that like we're building to it the whole book, so it'd be really mean of me not to show the reader. I really wanted the joy of getting to show these kids having a great time on stage. So that was really important to me, getting to show all of their hard work come to life.
It's one of the things. So I had mentioned to you via email that I think that sometimes humankind's biggest fear is being left behind or being abandoned. How did that work into what your story is about with Ash?
Ash has a lot of me in them, especially me in middle school. And I think that's a good point, that I think most people are have a worry about, will I get left behind? Everyone's always moving and changing and growing. And a part of life is sometimes that like friendships grow and change or split off. But that's scary, especially when you're, a fresh teenager. You don't know what's coming up. So it was important to me that I kind of tackle that in this book, and the different ways that, even though that's scary, change is good and good things happen when you let it happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think even into adulthood, every time we try to force something, it's sort of not natural. I might want to force something at work or in my personal life, but it's not a natural happening. And I think, of course, when you're talking about teenagers, and some of us haven't quite got out of the teenage mindset, I think, there's so much angst about, will I be liked? Will I be loved? Will I be left behind? Will I be included? And I thought you did such a natural job of incorporating those emotions and feelings into Upstaged. It was so wonderfully done. I mean, I don't think there was a character that I couldn't root for, which is, I will say it's a little bit unusual, because I think a lot of times a lot of books have so much friction in them, but I felt that yours was so inclusive. How important was that to you?
It was pretty important. In writing, a lot of times feel like, especially middle grade, there bullies exist, and like people aren't always perfect, but it was really important to me that especially Ash, as our main character, doesn't always make the right decisions, because they're kids, they're learning, they're growing, and the fastest and best and the way that every human does all that change is by making mistakes and learning from them. So
Absolutely. You give your characters a great deal of room to grow as well. I mean, as you said, Ash makes some mistakes, and they're human mistakes. I would say they're not intentional mistakes. They're just things that humans do. But you give each of the characters the ability to have a redemption, which is also very beautiful.
thank you.
So I think that going from friends to love interest is a big journey. How important was that in developing your characters? Because that's a really a big theme in this book.
That was something I had gone through in my own life at camp. And so I felt like it would be fun to include as a big theme, because I feel like, especially with queer kids, a lot of the time your relationships come from within your friend group, because, a queer kid, you tend to collect other queer kids around you. And so those are kind of also your dating pool a lot of the time. It's not, you can't just not walking up to a stranger. And, you're 13, 14, you're starting to get crushes for the first time, you're hanging out with these people all the time, and you're like, oh, I kind of see them a different way than I might have previously. And so I just felt like that was kind of fun and important to tackle. And I feel like it doesn't come up a ton in fiction nowadays.
I agree. And it's, there again, when you're that age, there's so many emotions and so many hormones going on, and everything is raging because everything is uber important right this minute, because we don't, that middle grade brain hasn't grown enough educationally to understand that everything isn't immediate. I think and that's the beauty of kids though, if you ask them how they feel or what they want, they almost always have a very direct answer, because they're so right in the moment. It's a beauty that maybe we lose as adults. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to me how in the moment middle schoolers tend to be, and how like I wish a little bit that I could live in the moment that much. I feel like I'm always worrying so far down the line, but middle schoolers especially have this way of just being like, this is the most important moment of my life right now, tomorrow does not matter.
Well, and I think also, since your book has just come out, you've had many deadlines in the past year that you've had to meet, and we do have to keep our eye on the goal line. Whereas if we could live in the moment, I think life would be a lot happier. But so this whole adulthood is just not what it was written out to be.
No, I wish I could go hang at camp with Ash and Ivy and everyone, and my worries about the performance I'm putting on in 3 weeks and not my deadline in 2 months.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned camp. So did you go to a theater camp, or what kind of camp did you go to?
It was all sorts of arts. I believe the camp initially started as the camp started as a music camp and then spread into theater. But now there's visual arts programs and writing and stuff. I personally went in high school for animation, of all things. But I made some like lifelong friends there. That experience was really, really important to me. And I went back a couple years later as a counselor there and worked with the middle schoolers. I had a bunch of middle school theater kids. I watched all of the drama of them rehearsing, and oh no, I have a crush on this other actor, but they have to do a kiss with their co-lead. So that definitely played a lot into the writing of this book.
I love that. And there again is that immediate right now reaction. So I absolutely love that. Well, Robin, I cannot say enough wonderful things about Upstaged. This was just absolutely delicious. Do you have a website or social media you would like to share?
I can be found online at Vellicor Victim, which is VELLICHOR and then victim. It means like the smell and feeling of used books. No one ever knows what it means. I was a high schooler.
I absolutely love that. I'll list that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I had such a wonderful time, Robin.
Thank you for
joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.